Hello there, and welcome to the Whispers of Time channel. I'm so glad you found your way here. Maybe you had a long day, or maybe you're the kind of person who likes falling asleep to deep thoughts and historical mysteries rather than counting sheep. Either way, tonight's journey is for you. You've got nothing to do but rest. Let your mind relax, your breathing slow, and your body grow light as if gravity itself has softened. Because tonight, we aren't simply reminiscing. We're drifting through the daily life of an ancient Egyptian honey-gatherer, a vast tapestry of human routines, crafts, and quiet moments unfolding slowly through time for thousands of years along the warm banks of the Nile. But beneath its familiarity lies secrets, forgotten rituals, invisible traditions, and ancient ways that defy what we thought we knew. We'll travel gently from the clay hives beneath the sun to the sacred chambers where honey becomes offering. From morning smoke curling over sleeping bees to the quiet moment when golden liquid pours into vessels older than memory itself. You'll hear of reeds and riverbanks, gods and gardens, and the strange, unfinished story of lives still echoing. Some of what you hear tonight may surprise you, or at the very least spark some curiosity as you drift off to sleep. And just before we drift away tonight, if you enjoy these quiet journeys and you want to be sure we meet again tomorrow night at the very same time, please take one gentle second to tap subscribe and the little bell right now. I promise, I personally guarantee, we will be here waiting for you tomorrow evening. Same soft voice, same calm place. Almost everyone is already asleep within the first few minutes, so do it while you're still awake. One tiny tap, and I'll see you again tomorrow night, exactly here, when your eyes close once more. Now let's begin. The sun has not yet risen over the eastern desert, but the honey-gatherer is already awake. The air is cool, almost cold, in these hours before dawn. In the small mud brick house, darkness still pools in the corners like water, like the Nile itself when it is deep and quiet and waiting. The gatherer's eyes open slowly, slowly, as they have opened every morning for years beyond counting. There is no sudden jolt, no alarm, only the soft awareness that the day has called and the body answers. The reed mat beneath is familiar, worn smooth by countless nights. The linen sheet is thin, woven by hands that know the rhythm of the loom as intimately as the gatherer knows the rhythm of the bees. Outside, somewhere in the pre-dawn stillness, a bird calls. Once, twice. Its voice is small and far away, as if it too is just waking, just remembering how to sing. The gatherer sits up slowly, quietly, in the darkness. The movement is gentle, practiced, a ritual performed so many times it has become part of the body's memory. Feet touch the cool earthen floor, and there is a moment, just a moment, of pure stillness. The world outside is waiting. The bees are waiting. The hives with their secret golden treasure are waiting, endlessly, patiently, beneath the stars that are just beginning to fade. In this house, life is simple. 4 walls of sun-dried brick, mud and straw pressed together by hands that understood the earth. A low doorway, a small window high on the eastern wall where light will soon pour like honey itself. A few possessions: clay pots stacked in the corner, a wooden headrest carved with protective symbols, a small shrine to the gods with offerings from yesterday, from the day before, from time folding back on itself in layers of devotion. The gatherer stands and wraps a simple linen kilt around the waist, the fabric cool and clean, washed in the Nile's water and dried in yesterday's sun. The movements are slow, unhurried. There is no need for haste. The bees will wait. They have waited for millennia, their small bodies carrying the knowledge of flowers and seasons and the transformation of nectar into gold. They are patient teachers, these creatures that were born, it is said, from the tears of Ra himself when the sun god wept. Outside, the sky is beginning to lighten, turning from black to the deep blue of lapis lazuli, the stone that adorns the necks of queens and the crowns of gods. The gatherer steps through the doorway, ducking slightly, and the morning air touches skin like a blessing, like the first breath of creation. The village is still asleep, wrapped in its dreams. Smoke will rise from cooking fire soon, but not yet. Not yet. For now, there is only silence and the soft whisper of the Nile in the distance, always flowing, always singing its ancient song. The gatherer walks quietly through the narrow paths between the houses, past the neighbor's courtyard, where a dog sleeps curled in the dust, past the potter's workshop, where yesterday's vessels stand in neat rows, waiting to be fired. The earth beneath bare feet is cool, still holding the memory of night's chill. Each step is deliberate, quiet, a small prayer of presence. Beyond the village, the path leads toward the river, toward the place where the hives stand. The gatherer has tended these hives for years, learned their secrets from a father who learned from his father. Knowledge passed down through generations, like water through channels carved in stone. The art of beekeeping is sacred work, holy work, work that connects the earthly realm to the divine. The bee, after all, is the emblem of Lower Egypt, the symbol of kingship and power, and the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. The sky grows lighter, turning now to the color of dawn, soft pink and gold spreading across the eastern horizon like paint poured from the palette of the gods. The gatherer walks quietly, slowly, carrying a clay pot and a small knife made of bronze, its edge sharp and gleaming. In the other hand, a bundle of dried grass and reeds, ready to be lit, ready to create the smoke that will calm the bees and open the door to their golden world. The hives come into view as the path curves around a stand of date palms. There they are, rows of cylindrical clay structures, each one carefully crafted, carefully placed. They lie horizontally, stacked sometimes in piles that reach toward the sky, bound together with mortar and care. These are not the same hives that were here 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, but they are made in the same way, with the same knowledge, the same respect for the small winged creatures that dwell within. The gatherer approaches slowly, quietly, and stands before the hives in the growing light. There is a moment of stillness, of listening. Inside the clay cylinders, the bees are stirring. You can hear them if you are very quiet, if you let your breathing slow and your thoughts soften. A low hum, gentle and constant, like the voice of the earth itself, like the heartbeat of something vast and ancient that has no name. The gatherer kneels and begins to prepare the fire. Dried grass and reeds are arranged in a small pile, and with a piece of flint and a careful strike, a spark leaps into life. The grass catches, begins to smolder, and smoke rises, thin and gray and sweetly scented. This smoke is a gift, a gentle messenger that tells the bees to remain calm, to fill their bellies with honey, and prepare for the brief interruption of their world. With the smoking bundle held carefully, the gatherer approaches the first hive. The entrance is at one end, sealed with a small clay cap that can be removed. Slowly, quietly, the gatherer lifts the cap and directs the smoke inside. The humming changes, becomes softer, more languid. The bees inside are drinking deeply of their own honey, their small bodies growing heavy and content. This is the ancient knowledge, the sacred understanding. Smoke speaks to bees in a language older than words, and they listen and they trust. Now the gatherer waits. Patience is the first lesson of the hive, the deepest lesson. You cannot rush the bees. You cannot force the honey to flow. You can only wait quietly, endlessly, while the smoke does its gentle work, and the sun rises higher in the Egyptian sky, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, and endless, endless light. The Nile is close enough that you can hear its whisper, the soft lapping of water against the reeds that grow along its banks. This river is the source of everything, the reason life blooms in this desert land. Without the Nile, there would be no fields of barley, no gardens of lotus and papyrus, no flowers for the bees to visit in their tireless journey from blossom to hive, from nectar to honey, from the raw material of nature to the finished substance that the gods themselves desire. The gatherer reaches into the hive carefully, slowly, fingers moving through the darkness toward the combs within. The texture is familiar, waxy, and slightly warm, built by the bees in perfect hexagonal cells, a geometry that no human hand could replicate. Each cell holds its treasure, some filled with golden honey, some with pollen, some with the tiny white larvae that will become the next generation of gatherers, the next generation of builders, the cycle continuing endlessly, quietly, through time. A section of comb is gently cut away with the bronze knife. The bees crawl across the gatherer's hands, over the wrists and forearms, but they do not sting. They are calm, heavy with honey, trusting in the ancient contract between human and insect, the agreement made so long ago that no one remembers its beginning. Perhaps it has always been this way. Perhaps in the very first garden, in the very first moment of awareness, humans and bees recognized in each other something necessary, something sacred, something that would bind them together through all the ages that would follow. The honeycomb is placed gently in the clay pot, and the gatherer moves to the next hive and the next. The process is repeated quietly, slowly, with the same care, the same reverence. Each hive is different. Some are strong and full, bursting with honey and bees. Some are smaller, newer, still building their strength. The gatherer knows each one, knows their temperament and their history, knows which hive came from which swarm and which queen rules within. As the sun climbs higher, the work continues. The light is warm now, touching the gatherer's shoulders and back, soaking into skin that has been bronzed by thousands of days under this same sun. The heat is not yet fierce, not yet the blazing furnace that the day will become. But it is coming, slowly, inevitably, as predictable as the flooding of the Nile, as certain as the stars that wheel overhead each night in their endless dance. The gatherer hums softly, a wordless melody that matches the rhythm of the bee's own song. This is another part of the sacred work, the understanding that sound and vibration matter, that the bees are listening always, always to the world around them. A gentle voice, a calm presence, these are the tools of the honey gatherer as much as smoke and knife and clay pot. When the pot is full, heavy with dripping combs, the gatherer rises and begins the walk back to the village. The sun is well above the horizon now, and the day has truly begun. In the village, people are emerging from their houses. Children run between the buildings, their laughter bright and sharp in the morning air. Women carry water jars on their heads, moving with a grace that seems effortless, their bodies knowing the balance without thought. Men head toward the fields, toward the workshops, toward the river where boats wait to be loaded or unloaded or prepared for the day's journey up or down the Nile's endless length. The gatherer's house comes into view, and there's a small fire burning outside, tended by the gatherer's wife. She looks up and smiles, a quiet expression of welcome and recognition. She has prepared a simple breakfast, bread baked yesterday, a few dates, a cup of beer made from barley and flavored, sometimes, with honey. This is the food of Egypt, simple and nourishing, the same food that has sustained these people for generations, beyond counting. But before eating, the honey must be processed. The gatherer sits near the fire and begins the careful work of separating honey from wax. The combs are crushed gently, pressed through a cloth woven from flax, so fine it might have been made by the goddess Tayet herself, she who weaves the linen for the living and the dead. The honey flows through, thick and golden and impossibly sweet, gathering in a bowl below while the wax remains behind, to be cleaned and purified, and used for 100 different purposes: cosmetics, paintings, sealant for jars, offerings in the temples, fuel for lamps that burn in sacred spaces. The honey is the color of sunlight captured in liquid form, the color of the desert at midday, the color of eternity itself. It moves slowly, so slowly, pouring in a stream that seems to defy time, each drop hanging suspended for a heartbeat before falling to join the growing pool below. The gatherer watches this process with a satisfaction that is deep and wordless, a feeling that comes from doing work that matters, work that connects the present moment to all the moments that came before, and all the moments that will come after. The wife brings a small piece of bread and dips it in the honey, offers it to the gatherer as a blessing, as a sharing of the sweetness that has been coaxed from flower and bee and patient human hands. The taste is pure, complex, carrying within it the flavor of 1,000 blossoms, the essence of the lotus that grows in still pools, the wildflowers that bloom in the delta, the herbs that flourish in cultivated gardens where water is led through careful channels from the Nile's bounty. After eating, the gatherer pours the honey into vessels for storage. These are special jars, made by the potter who lives 3 houses away, crafted from the Nile's clay and fired until they ring like bells when you tap them with your fingernail. The jars are sealed with wax, the same wax that came from the hives, completing the circle, making everything whole. Some of these jars will be kept for the family's use. Some will be traded in the market for grain or fish or linen or tools. Some will be given to the temple as offerings to the gods who make all things possible, who give the sun that warms the earth, the rain that never falls, but is not needed because the Nile floods each year with perfect regularity, bringing the black soil that makes Egypt the richest land on earth. The day grows hotter, and the gatherer rests in the shade of the house. This is the time when little can be done outdoors, when the sun is too fierce, when even the bees slow their foraging and cluster in the hives, fanning their wings to create a cooling breeze. The gatherer sits on a low stool, weaving a new basket from reeds gathered at the river's edge. The work is meditative, repetitive, the hands moving in patterns learned in childhood, over and under, creating something useful from the raw materials that the land provides so generously. Inside the house, it is cooler, the thick mud walls keeping the heat at bay. The wife grinds barley for tomorrow's bread, the stone quern making a soft grinding sound that is like music, like the voice of labor itself, steady and eternal. Their children, 2 daughters and a son, are at their own tasks. The eldest daughter helps her mother, learning the skills she will need when she has her own house, her own family. The younger daughter plays with a doll made from cloth and stuffed with reeds, singing to it softly, pretending it is a baby that needs care and comfort. The son, still small, sits in the corner and arranges stones in patterns, building and rebuilding tiny villages that exist only in his imagination. This is the rhythm of the day, slowly unfolding, quietly revealing its shape. Work and rest, labor and ease, the balance that makes life sustainable, that allows humans to thrive in a land that could easily destroy those who do not understand its demands and its gifts. As the afternoon wanes, the gatherer rises again and prepares to visit the hives once more. This is not a time for harvesting, but for observation, for maintenance, for the careful attention that keeps the colonies healthy and strong. The gatherer carries water in a small jar, pours it into shallow clay dishes placed near the hives. The bees need water, especially in this heat, and they come to drink, carefully landing on the edges of the dishes where the water is shallow enough that they will not drown. Watching the bees drink is another meditation, another lesson in patience and presence. Each bee approaches the water with purpose, extends her long tongue to lap at the liquid, then flies away to carry the water back to the hive, where it will be used to cool the interior, to dilute honey for feeding the young, to maintain the perfect environment where life continues its ancient work of transformation and renewal. Some of the hives need repair. The clay cracks in the heat, develops small fissures that need to be sealed. The gatherer mixes fresh mud, the same mixture used to build houses and walls, the same mixture used for thousands of years, because it works, because it is freely available, because the Nile provides not just water, but the very earth itself, rich and malleable and perfect for shaping into the structures that shelter both humans and bees. With careful hands, the gatherer patches the cracks, smooths the surface, ensures that each hive is whole and sound. This is love, though the word is never spoken. This is care, though no one is watching. This is the quiet devotion that sustains life, that builds civilizations, that creates continuity across the generations. The bees do not thank the gatherer, but they thrive, and their thriving is thanks enough, more than enough. As evening approaches, the gatherer sits near the hives and simply watches as the foragers return from their day's work. They come in streams, small dark shapes against the golden sky, their legs heavy with pollen, their bodies full of nectar. They navigate with precision that seems impossible, finding their own hive among the many, finding their own entrance among the possibilities, guided by scent and sight, and some ancient knowledge coded into their very being. The gatherer understands this feeling, this sense of belonging, of home. When the day's work is done, and the path leads back to the mud brick house, when the smell of cooking drifts on the evening air, and the voices of family call you inside, there is no confusion, no uncertainty. You know where you belong. You know your place in the great pattern that is woven from threads of connection and duty and love. The family gathers for the evening meal. The wife has prepared lentils cooked with onions and garlic, seasoned with salt that came from the northern lakes where the sea breathes into the delta. There is bread, always bread, the foundation of every meal, the substance that turns hunger into satisfaction. There are a few fish, caught this morning in the Nile by a neighbor who trades his catch for honey, for the sweet golden substance that makes even simple food taste like a feast. They eat together, sitting on the floor, the food spread on a woven mat. The gatherer speaks little, but listens to the children's stories of their day, to the wife's news from the village, to the small dramas and joys that fill ordinary life. The youngest daughter saw a heron at the river, standing so still it looked like it was carved from stone. The son helped the potter carry clay from the riverbank, his small hands muddy and proud. The eldest daughter learned a new song, a hymn to Hathor, goddess of love and joy and music, and she sings a few notes, her voice sweet and uncertain in the dimming light. After the meal, the family sits outside in the coolness that comes with dusk. The sky is painted in colors that have no names, shades of orange and purple and deep, deep blue. The first stars appear, tiny points of light that the ancestors called the imperishable ones, the souls of those who lived rightly and now shine forever in the night sky. The gatherer points out the constellations, tells the children the old stories of gods and heroes, of the journey of Ra through the underworld each night, battling the serpent of chaos, emerging victorious each dawn to bring light and life to the world again. The children grow sleepy, their eyes heavy, their questions slowing, then stopping. The wife carries them inside one by one, lays them on their sleeping mats, covers them with linen sheets. The gatherer sits a while longer, listening to the night sounds, the distant bark of a dog, the cry of a night bird, the eternal whisper of the Nile that never ceases, never rests, flowing from somewhere beyond knowing to somewhere beyond sight, carrying within it all the stories of all the people who have ever lived along its banks. Before sleep, the gatherer makes a small offering at the household shrine. A bit of honey, a piece of bread, a cup of water. These are given to the gods, to the ancestors, to the unseen forces that govern life and death, and all the mysteries between. The gatherer whispers a prayer, words worn smooth by repetition, asking for protection, for health, for the continuation of this life that is both ordinary and sacred, both simple and infinitely complex. Sleep comes easily to those who work with their hands and their hearts. The gatherer lies down on the reed mat, pulls the linen sheet close, and closes their eyes. Tomorrow will be another day much like this one, and the day after will be the same, and the day after that. But this is not monotony. This is rhythm. This is the dance of life that has no beginning and no end. Only the eternal present moment where bees make honey and rivers flow, and humans do their best to live in harmony with forces greater than themselves. In dreams, the gatherer sometimes flies, not like a bird, but like a bee, small and quick and purposeful. In dreams, the world is a garden of infinite blossoms, each one offering its nectar freely, each one a gift from the earth to those who know how to receive. In dreams, the hives are made of light instead of clay, and the honey that flows from them is not just food, but pure joy, pure sweetness, the essence of existence itself distilled into liquid gold. The seasons turn slowly in Egypt, where winter is merely a cooler version of summer, where spring and autumn are marked not by dramatic changes in temperature, but by the subtle shifts in the Nile's behavior, the rising and falling of its waters that determine everything, absolutely everything, about how life can be lived. The gatherer knows these seasons intimately, knows when the floods will come and when they will recede, knows when the fields will be planted and when they will be harvested, knows when the flowers will bloom and when the bees will make the most honey, their hives overflowing with abundance that seems like a miracle, but is simply the natural result of understanding and working with the rhythms of the natural world. During the flood season, when the fields are underwater and the land is being renewed by the fertile silt that the river carries from far to the south, the gatherer has more time for other work. This is when the hives are inspected most thoroughly, when repairs are made, when new hives are constructed from clay and straw, and the patient work of hands that know their craft. The gatherer digs clay from a spot near the river where it is particularly fine and smooth, carries it back in baskets, mixes it with chopped straw to give it strength and prevent cracking. The mixture is shaped into long cylinders, hollowed out, left to dry slowly in the shade so they won't crack from drying too fast. Children from the village come to watch sometimes, fascinated by the process, by the transformation of wet earth into the hard structures that will house the sacred bees. The gatherer teaches them, patiently, slowly, the same way the gatherer was taught. This is how knowledge survives, how wisdom passes from the old to the young, how the chain remains unbroken through all the generations. A child who watches today may be a master beekeeper in 30 years, teaching their own children, their own apprentices, the secrets of smoke and timing and gentle hands. The gatherer also makes the journey to the temple during this season, carrying jars of honey as offerings. The temple is a day's walk away, a massive structure of stone that seems to have been made by giants, by gods themselves. The walls are covered in carvings and paintings, scenes of the pharaoh offering to the gods, scenes of the gods granting life and power and mad, the divine order that keeps chaos at bay. The gatherer is small in this space, insignificant, just one tiny human in the presence of forces that dwarf human understanding. But the priests accept the honey offerings with gratitude and respect. They know its value. They know that honey is used in sacred rituals, in the opening of the mouth ceremony that allows the dead to speak and eat and breathe in the afterlife, in the anointing of sacred statues, in the preparation of incense that carries prayers to the heavens. The gatherer's work, humble as it seems, is part of the great web of religious life that sustains Egypt, that connects the earthly realm to the divine, that ensures the continuation of creation itself. In the temple, the gatherer sees honey being poured into offering bowls made of alabaster, so thin it glows when light passes through it. The gatherer sees priests using beeswax to seal documents, to preserve paintings, to create small figurines of the gods that will be placed in tombs. The gatherer sees and understands that the bees are not just insects producing a sweet substance. They are participants in the sacred order, creatures that bridge the gap between the mundane and the miraculous. Walking home from the temple, the gatherer feels a deep sense of purpose, of connection to something larger than one small life. The path leads through fields that are still underwater, reflecting the sky like vast mirrors. Water birds wade in the shallows, hunting for fish and frogs. The air is full of the smell of wet earth, of growth, of potential. In a few months, these fields will be green with barley and emmer wheat. In a few months more, they will be golden with grain ready for harvest. The cycle continues, always endlessly, the rising and falling of the water marking time more reliably than any calendar. Back in the village, life continues its steady rhythm. The potter makes jars, the weaver makes linen, the carpenter makes tools and furniture, the fisherman catches fish, the farmer plants and harvests, and the gatherer tends the bees. Each person has their role, their contribution to the whole. No one works alone. Everyone depends on everyone else. A web of mutual support and exchange that makes survival possible in a land that could be harsh, but is instead, with proper understanding and effort, abundantly generous. The gatherer trades honey for many things. A new bronze knife from the metalworker, sharper than the old one, perfect for cutting combs. A beautiful blue-glazed amulet from a traveling merchant, shaped like a scarab beetle, symbol of rebirth and transformation. Gift for the eldest daughter, who will soon be of marriageable age. A length of fine linen from the weaver, white as moonlight, to be saved for special occasions, for festivals and holy days when ordinary clothes are not sufficient. Sometimes the gatherer trades honey for papyrus, the precious writing material made from the reeds that grow in the delta. The gatherer cannot read or write, but the village scribe can, and for a small payment of honey or bread or beer, the scribe will write a letter, will record a transaction, will document the important moments that deserve to be remembered. The gatherer has the scribe record the birth of each child, the death of the gatherer's father 3 years ago, the dedication of a new set of hives to the god Ra. May he shine forever. These documents are kept in a wooden box in the house, precious beyond their material value, because they represent continuity, memory, the assertion that this life matters, that these events are significant enough to be written down, to be preserved, to be passed to future generations who will read them and know that their ancestors lived and worked and loved and created meaning in a world that could easily overwhelm them with its vastness and indifference. The gatherer sometimes wonders about the future, about what will become of this land, these people, these ways of living. Will the children's children still tend bees in clay hives? Will they still make offerings of honey to gods whose names are already older than memory? Will the Nile still flood each year with perfect regularity? Or will something change, some vast shift in the order of things that will require new knowledge, new adaptations, new ways of being human in a world that is always in flux, even when it appears eternal and unchanging? These thoughts come in the quiet moments, in the stillness before dawn, or the peace of evening when the day's work is done. But they do not trouble the gatherer deeply. There is too much to do in the present moment to worry overmuch about the distant future. The bees need tending now. The children need feeding now. The house needs maintaining now. The present is where life actually happens, where meaning is made, where love is enacted through the 1,000 small gestures of care and attention that add up to something larger, something that might be called happiness, or might be called simply being alive in the fullest sense. The gatherer has known hardship, of course. Everyone has. There was the year when disease swept through the hives, killing colony after colony, leaving empty clay tubes where there should have been the hum of busy wings. The gatherer nearly gave up that year, nearly turned to other work, to fishing or farming or pottery. But the wife said, "Wait, be patient, trust." And the next spring, a swarm appeared as if sent by the gods themselves, settled in one of the empty hives, and began to rebuild. Within 2 years, the hives were full again, thriving again, producing honey again in such abundance it seemed like compensation for the lean years, like a reward for faithfulness. There was the year when the Nile barely flooded, when the harvest was poor, and hunger walked through the village like an unwelcome guest. The gatherer's family had honey, which sustained them when bread was scarce, which could be traded for what little grain was available. They survived, but the gatherer remembers the hollow eyes of the children, the way ribs showed through skin, the fear that hovered at the edge of every day. The next year the flood was normal, and the year after it was abundant, and the fear receded back into memory where it waits, patient and dark, ready to return if conditions allow. There was the death of the gatherer's father, a man who seemed as permanent as the Nile itself, as enduring as the stones of the temple. But he sickened one winter, grew weak and thin, stopped eating, stopped speaking, and finally stopped breathing. The gatherer washed the body with water from the Nile, anointed it with honey and oils, wrapped it in linen, and paid the priests to perform the rituals that would ensure safe passage to the afterlife. The body was placed in a simple tomb, along with a jar of honey, a cup for water, a pair of sandals for walking, the tools needed for the journey through the darkness to the field of reeds, where the worthy spend eternity in a paradise that looks very much like Egypt, but without suffering, without fear, without death. The gatherer visits this tomb sometimes, brings fresh offerings, speaks to the Father's Spirit, asks for guidance and protection. The dead are not gone, not really. They are just on the other side of a veil that is thinner than people think, permeable, crossable in dreams and prayers, and the quiet moments when the living reach out with love and remembrance. The gatherer feels the Father's presence sometimes, a warmth, a sense of approval, a whisper of encouragement when the work is hard, and the days are long, and the burden feels too heavy for one pair of shoulders. But there is also joy, so much joy. The laughter of the children playing in the dust, inventing games that have no rules and infinite variations. The satisfaction of opening a hive and finding it full to bursting with honey. The combs so heavy they bend under their own weight. The quiet contentment of sitting with the wife in the evening. No words needed, just presence, just the accumulated trust and affection of years spent working together toward common goals. The taste of fresh bread dipped in new honey, the sensation of cool water on a hot day, the sight of the sun setting over the Nile in colors that defy description, the sound of music drifting from a neighbor's house where someone is playing a lute or a flute or simply singing, their voice rising and falling like water, like breath, like life itself. The festivals are times of particular joy, when work stops and the whole village gathers to celebrate the gods, the harvest, the turning of the seasons. There is music and dancing, food and drink, processions and pageantry. The gatherers' family dresses in their best linen, applies kohl around their eyes, adorns themselves with whatever jewelry they possess, simple but beautiful copper and faience, and beads made from stones polished by the river's patient flow. During the festival of Min, god of fertility and harvest, the gatherer joins the procession carrying offerings to the temple. There is honey, of course, in a specially decorated jar, but also bread and beer and flowers and incense. The priests perform rituals that are ancient beyond measure, chanting in voices that seem to carry the weight of millennia, invoking the gods to bless the fields, to ensure abundance, to grant children to those who desire them, to maintain Mad, the cosmic order that allows civilization to exist rather than dissolving into chaos. The gatherer watches and participates and feels part of something vast, something that began long before this life and will continue long after. The individual is temporary, a brief flicker of consciousness in the eternal darkness. But the community endures, the traditions endure, the gods endure. Egypt endures, has endured for thousands of years, will endure, surely, for thousands more. At night, when the festivals end and the village returns to quiet, the gatherer lies awake for a while, listening to the wife's breathing, to the children's soft snores, to the distant sounds of the night. There is a dog barking somewhere. There is the wind moving through the palm fronds with a sound like rain, though rain almost never falls here. There is the eternal voice of the Nile, patient and persistent, flowing from the heart of Africa to the Mediterranean Sea, carrying everything it touches towards some vast dissolution and renewal. The gatherer thinks about the bees, wonders if they sleep or if they work through the night, maintaining the hive's temperature, tending the young, processing nectar into honey that will sustain them through the times when flowers do not bloom. The hive is a miracle of organization, of cooperation, of individuals subordinating their desires to the needs of the whole. Perhaps this is what humans are meant to learn from the bees. This lesson of working together, of each one doing their part, of creating something larger and more enduring than any single life. The gatherer has heard stories of lands to the north where it rains frequently, where the earth is covered in forests so thick you cannot walk through them, where winter brings cold that kills and snow that buries everything in white silence. These stories seem like myths, like tales of the gods, otherworldly realms. How could such places exist? How could humans survive there? But travelers swear it is true, and merchants bring goods from those distant lands, timber and metals, and strange foods that taste of otherness, of possibilities beyond the narrow world of the Nile Valley. But the gatherer has no desire to travel, to leave this place that is home in the deepest sense. Everything needed for a good life is here. Water from the Nile, sun from Ra, soil that produces food, reeds and clay for building, bees that make honey, family that makes life meaningful. What more could anyone want? Wealth, power, fame. These are illusions, distractions from the real business of being human, which is to live simply, to work honestly, to love generously, to participate in the great dance of existence with grace and gratitude. Gatherer ages slowly, as all humans do. The hair begins to gray, the skin becomes more lined, the hands grow stiffer in the mornings. But the knowledge deepens, becomes richer, more nuanced. The gatherer knows things about bees that cannot be put into words, understands their moods and behaviors with an intuition that comes from decades of close attention. The gatherer can tell by the sound of a hive whether it is healthy or diseased, thriving or struggling, preparing to swarm or settling in for the season. The gatherer teaches the eldest daughter these skills, passing on the knowledge just as the father passed it to the gatherer. She is a quick learner, careful and patient, with gentle hands and a calm demeanor that the bees respond to. She will be a fine beekeeper, perhaps even better than the gatherer, bringing her own insights and innovations to the ancient craft. This is how things improve across generations, not through dramatic revolutions, but through tiny adjustments, small improvements, the accumulated wisdom of countless practitioners, each adding their small contribution to the growing body of knowledge. Sun is less interested in the bees, more drawn to the river, to boats and fishing and the romance of travel. The gatherer does not force the issue. Each person must find their own path, their own way of contributing to the community. Perhaps the sun will become a boatman, ferrying goods up and down the Nile, seeing the whole length of Egypt from the cataracts in the south to the delta in the north. Perhaps he will bring back stories and goods and new ideas that will enrich the village in ways that honey never could. The youngest daughter is still too small to know what path she will take. She loves the bees, delights in watching them, but she also loves music, loves stories, loves making things with her hands, clay animals and reed dolls and baskets, woven with more enthusiasm than skill. The world is open to her still, full of possibilities. The gatherer watches her and feels a tender hope for her future, a prayer that she will find work that fulfills her, love that sustains her, a place in the community where she belongs and is valued. The gatherer's reputation grows slowly over the years. People from neighboring villages come to trade for honey, having heard that the gatherer's bees produce honey of exceptional quality, clear and sweet and pure. The gatherer does not know why this should be so, whether it is the particular flowers the bees visit, or some technique of hive management that has been perfected through long practice, or simply luck, the favor of the gods. But the reputation brings prosperity, allows the family to live more comfortably than they might otherwise, to accumulate small luxuries, a better sleeping mat, a carved wooden box for valuables, a second set of clothes for each family member. But the gatherer is careful not to let prosperity lead to pride or greed. The surplus is shared with those in need, with with the widow who lives alone, with the family whose house burned down and who lost everything, with the temple that serves the gods and therefore serves everyone. This is mad, the principle of balance and rightness, the understanding that wealth is a responsibility as much as a privilege, that those who have more must give more, that the community thrives only when everyone's basic needs are met. The seasons continue their slow wheel, each year much like the last, yet each unique in its small details. One year a leopard is seen near the village, come down from the desert in search of prey. Another year, a traveling musician stops and plays songs that no one has heard before, melodies from distant lands that haunt the mind long after the musician has moved on. One year twins are born to a neighbor, a rare and auspicious event that is celebrated with a feast and offerings to the gods. Another year locusts come in clouds that darken the sky, eating everything green, leaving devastation in their wake. A reminder that nature gives and nature takes away, and humans must accept both with equal grace. Through it all, the gatherer continues the work, tending the hives, harvesting the honey, making offerings, trading goods, raising children, loving the wife, honoring the ancestors, participating in festivals, repairing the house, weaving baskets, telling stories, teaching the young, learning from the old, sleeping and waking and sleeping again. The rhythm as natural and inevitable as breathing. The gatherer sometimes imagines the bee's perspective, what it must be like to be so small, to live such a brief life, a few weeks for most workers, a few years at most for the queen, to know your purpose so completely that there is no doubt, no hesitation, no existential crisis. A worker bee emerges from her cell knowing exactly what to do. Clean the hive, feed the young, build comb, guard the entrance, forage for nectar and pollen. And finally, when her wings are too tattered to fly anymore, die somewhere away from the hive, so her body will not burden her sisters with the work of removal. There is something beautiful in this clarity, this absolute commitment to the colony's welfare over individual survival. Humans are more complex, burdened with consciousness, with the ability to imagine alternatives, to desire what we do not have, to fear what we cannot control. But perhaps the bees can teach us to accept our role, to work for something larger than ourselves, to find meaning not in accumulation or achievement, but in simple participation, in showing up day after day to do the work that is ours to do, whatever that might be. The gatherer finds this meaning in the gentle work with the bees, in the harvest of sweetness from flower and insect and human patience. There is no fame in this work. No monuments will bear the gatherer's name. No scribes will record the gatherer's deeds for posterity. But the honey flows, the family eats, the gods receive their offerings, and the great web of Egyptian life continues, sustained in part by this small contribution, by the gatherer's quiet devotion to the sacred insects that were born. So the stories say, from the tears of the sun, God himself, when he wept for the beauty and sorrow of the world he had created. As the years accumulate, the gatherer begins to think more often about death, not with fear, but with curiosity, with a sense of completion drawing near. The body grows more tired, the work harder. The son is grown now, married, with children of his own. The eldest daughter has taken over most of the beekeeping work, running the operation with skill and confidence. The youngest daughter has become a skilled weaver, her linen sought after for its fineness and beauty. The wife's hair is white now, her face deeply lined, but her eyes are still bright, still full of the intelligence and warmth that first drew the gatherer to her so many years ago. They sit together in the evening, these two old people, and speak of the life they have shared. The children raised, the hardships overcome, the joys celebrated, the quiet contentment of work done faithfully, of duties fulfilled, of love given and received without reserve. They wonder what the afterlife will be like, whether it will truly resemble the field of reeds described in the sacred texts, whether there will be bees there, whether the gatherer will continue the work in some transformed way, gathering honey that never diminishes, tending hives that never fail, in a garden where flowers bloom eternally and the sun never sets. The gatherer has already begun to prepare for death in the practical way that Egyptians do, setting aside a portion of each honey harvest to pay for embalming, for wrapping, for the tomb that has been dug into the desert hillside beyond the village. The gatherer has chosen the offerings that will be buried along: a jar of the finest honey, a small clay model of a beehive, a knife for cutting combs, an amulet in the shape of a bee, tools for continuing the sacred work in the world beyond death. But death is not yet. There is still work to do, still sweetness to harvest, still time to watch the sun rise and set, to hear the bees humming in their clay homes, to taste honey fresh from the comb, to hold the wife's hand in the evening cool, to see the grandchildren running through the village with the same wild energy that the gatherer's own children once had, the same energy that flows through all young things, connecting them to the source of life itself. One morning, the gatherer wakes very early and walks to the hives in the pre-dawn darkness. The sky is just beginning to lighten in the east, the stars fading one by one into the gathering blue. The Nile whispers its eternal song. The village is still sleeping. The gatherer stands before the hives and listens to the gentle hum within, the sound that has been the soundtrack of this life, the constant reminder that life is happening, always happening, in a million small ways that add up to the grand miracle of existence. The gatherer speaks quietly to the bees, thanking them for their partnership, for their patient teaching, for the golden sweetness they have produced year after year. The gatherer thanks the gods for the privilege of this work, for the gift of a life spent in service to something beautiful and necessary. The gatherer thanks the ancestors for passing down the knowledge, for creating the traditions that have shaped this life from beginning to whatever end is approaching. And as the sun rises, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, the gatherer feels a profound peace, a sense of rightness that transcends words. This is enough. This simple life, this humble work, this participation in the eternal cycle of growth and harvest, giving and receiving, living and dying. This is enough. This is everything. The gatherer opens the first hive, and the bees pour out, streaming toward the flowers that are just opening to receive them. Tiny creatures on their ancient mission to gather nectar and transform it into the sweetest substance known to humans, the food of gods and kings, and ordinary people who have learned to appreciate the gifts that the natural world offers so freely to those who approach with respect and care. And the gatherer watches them go, these small winged miracles, and smiles, and begins the day's work once more, quietly, slowly, endlessly, as the wheel of time turns, and the Nile flows, and the sun shines, and the story of human life in all its ordinary, extraordinary beauty continues to unfold, moment by precious moment, breath by sacred breath, drop by golden drop. The honey gatherer's hands move through the smoke and the wax and the sweet dripping combs. And this is prayer, and this is love, and this is meaning made manifest in the simplest and most profound way possible, through work done with attention, with care, with devotion to something larger than the small self that will one day cease, but whose contribution to the ongoing story will remain invisible but real, part of the great tapestry of human effort and natural abundance that has sustained our species through all the long millennia since we first learned to live in harmony with the beings and forces that share this earth with us. In the village, smoke rises from morning fires. Children wake and cry and are soothed. Women begin the day's tasks, grinding grain and carrying water and sweeping floors. Men prepare their tools and head toward their work. The potter spins the wheel, the weaver threads the loom, the fisherman mends his nets, and the honey gatherer tends the bees, each person in their place, each contributing their gift to the whole, the community functioning like a hive itself, each individual cell of the greater organism, working together to create something that none could create alone. A civilization, a culture, a way of being human that honors both the practical necessities of survival and the spiritual hunger for meaning and connection and beauty. The gatherer thinks of all the honey that has been harvested over the years, all the jars that have been filled and sealed and traded and offered and consumed. If you could gather all that honey together in one place, it would fill a room, perhaps a house. But more than the physical substance, there is the accumulated experience, the knowledge gained, the relationships formed, the moments of joy and struggle and quiet satisfaction. These cannot be measured or quantified, but they are real, more real perhaps than the honey itself, which is consumed and gone, while memory and knowledge and love persist, passing from generation to generation like a flame that never quite goes out. The gatherer's daughter is teaching her own daughter now, a girl of perhaps 6 or 7, how to approach the hives without fear, how to move slowly and speak softly, how to read the mood of the colony by listening to the pitch and rhythm of their humming. The little girl is wide-eyed and serious, absorbing every word, every gesture, just as the gatherer once did, just as the gatherer's father did before that. The chain of knowledge extending backward and forward through time, unbroken and precious. The gatherer watches this teaching and feels a deep satisfaction, knowing that the work will continue, that the bees will be tended, that the honey will flow long after this body has been wrapped in linen and placed in the desert tomb. This is a kind of immortality, not the grand immortality of pharaohs, whose names are carved in stone, but the quiet immortality of useful knowledge passed faithfully from one generation to the next, like the Nile's water flowing eternally from somewhere unknown to somewhere equally mysterious. The day's heat builds slowly, relentlessly, as it always does. By midday, the air shimmers above the ground, creating mirages that look like pools of water in the distance. The gatherer retreats to the shade, drinks cool water from a jar that was buried in the ground overnight to keep it cold. This is an old trick, simple wisdom that makes life bearable in a climate that could easily become unbearable without such knowledge, without such small accommodations to the demands of sun and sand and sky. The wife prepares the midday meal, working over the fire despite the heat, because the family must eat, because life continues regardless of comfort or discomfort. She has made a stew of lentils and onions, seasoned with cumin and coriander, herbs that grow in the small garden behind the house, where they coax green things from the earth with careful watering and patient attention. The smell is rich and savory, mixing with the smoke from the fire, drifting through the village where other families are preparing their own meals. Each household a small universe of daily survival and love. They eat together in the shade of the house, the family gathered around the mat, hands reaching for bread, dipping it in the stew, chewing slowly, savoring the flavors that are both familiar and somehow always new, always satisfying. The grandchildren chatter about their day, about the frog they found at the river's edge, about the story an elder told them of how the world was created from the primordial waters, about their plans to build a raft from reeds and float down the Nile like great explorers, like the heroes of ancient tales. The gatherer listens and smiles, and occasionally offers a comment or a question, but mostly just absorbs the sounds of family, the music of ordinary life that is the most beautiful music there is, more beautiful than temple hymns or festival songs, because it is real and immediate and unrepeatable. This exact moment with these exact people, in this exact configuration that will never come again, that exists only now and then becomes memory, becomes part of the vast accumulation of moments that constitute a life. After the meal, the gatherer dozes in the shade, the body relaxing into the pleasant heaviness that comes after eating, after working in the morning heat. Dreams come quickly in these afternoon naps, strange fragmentary visions that blend memory and imagination, past and future, the living and the dead. gatherer dreams of the father, young and strong again, teaching a child how to smoke a hive. The gatherer dreams of bees the size of birds, making honeycombs in the sky. The gatherer dreams of the Nile running backward, flowing from north to south, returning to its source in the mysterious lands beyond the cataracts, where the river emerges from the realm of the gods. Waking comes gradually, softly, consciousness returning like water seeping into dry ground. The gatherer opens eyes to see the familiar interior of the house, the mud brick walls, the few possessions arranged neatly, the shrine to the gods with its fresh offerings. Outside, the heat is beginning to diminish, the sun starting its slow descent toward the western horizon, where it will enter the underworld and battle the forces of chaos before emerging victorious at dawn. The eternal cycle that reassures everyone that despite all changes, despite all uncertainties, some things remain constant. Some things can be trusted absolutely. The gatherer rises and drinks more water, splashes face and hands with the cool liquid, feels refreshed and ready for the evening tasks. There are baskets to weave, nets to repair, a crack in one of the storage jars that needs to be sealed with wax. The gatherer settles into this work with the same quiet attention given to everything, understanding that there is no hierarchy of importance, that mending a jar is as sacred as harvesting honey if it is done with care, with presence, with the awareness that all work is holy when it serves life, when it contributes to the continuation of the community. The wife sits nearby, grinding grain for tomorrow's bread, the rhythmic sound of stone against stone creating a tempo that the gatherer's weaving matches unconsciously. They work in comfortable silence, two people who have shared so many years that words are often unnecessary, that communication happens through presence and rhythm, and the occasional glance or smile. This is marriage in its deepest form, not the passion of youth, but the steady companionship of age, the knowledge that you are not alone, that someone shares your burdens and joys, that when death comes, it will not find you isolated, but connected, woven into the fabric of family and community in ways that transcend the individual body's mortality. As evening approaches, the gatherer makes one final visit to the hives. The bees are returning from their last foraging runs of the day, laden with pollen and nectar from flowers that close at dusk. The gatherer checks each hive, listening, observing, making mental notes about which colonies are strong and which need attention. One hive seems less active than the others, the humming quieter, fewer bees coming and going. The gatherer makes a note to investigate more closely tomorrow, to determine if the queen is failing, if the colony is diseased, if some intervention is needed to save them. This care, this attention to detail, is what separates a skilled beekeeper from a careless one. The bees give so much. They deserve to receive care in return. They deserve to have their needs met, their problems addressed, their lives valued not just for what they produce, but for what they are. living beings engaged in their own complex existence, pursuing their own survival and flourishing with the same determination and intelligence that humans bring to their endeavors. The sun sets in a blaze of color, orange and red, and purple bleeding across the western sky, as if the gods have spilled paint across the heavens. The gatherer stands and watches this daily miracle, this transformation of day into night that never becomes mundane, that always carries a sense of wonder, of gratitude for being alive to witness it. The first stars appear, tiny points of light in the darkening blue, the imperishable ones who watch over the world from their high vantage, the souls of the righteous dead who have passed judgment and been granted eternal life among the gods. The gatherer returns to the house as darkness settles over the village like a blanket, soft and complete. Oil lamps are lit, their small flames pushing back the darkness, creating pools of warm light where families gather, where stories are told, where children's eyes grow heavy and close, where the day's last tasks are completed before sleep claims everyone, pulling them down into the mysterious realm where dreams reign and the soul travels to places the waking mind cannot follow. The evening meal is simple: bread and honey, a few figs, some cheese made from goat's milk. The family eats quietly, the children already half asleep, nodding over their food. The wife hums a lullaby, an ancient melody that has been sung to Egyptian children for centuries, a song that carries within it all the accumulated tenderness of mothers soothing their babies, creating a sound bridge between wakefulness and sleep, between the known world and the unknown realm of dreams. The gatherer helps the wife put the children to bed, spreading their sleeping mats, covering them with thin sheets, whispering blessings over them, prayers for protection, for health, for long life and happiness. The children murmur sleepy responses, their eyes already closed, their breathing deepening into the rhythm of sleep. The gatherer touches each small head gently, feeling the softness of their hair, the warmth of their skin, the precious vulnerability of childhood that calls forth such fierce protection from adults who remember their own childhood, their own need for safety and love. Outside, the village settles into quietness. A dog barks once, twice, then falls silent. Someone laughs in a nearby house, the sound quickly muffled. The Nile whispers its eternal song, carrying the day's heat away toward the sea, preparing for the cool of night when the desert's chill spreads across the land, and people huddle under their sheets and are grateful for shelter, for walls that keep out the wind, for roofs that hold back the vast emptiness of the star-filled sky. The gatherer and the wife sit outside their door for a while, enjoying the cool air, the brief respite from the day's heat. They speak quietly of tomorrow's tasks, of the repairs needed on the house, of the eldest daughter's upcoming wedding, of the son's plan to travel to Memphis with a cargo of pottery and honey to trade. They speak of the grandchildren's growth, how quickly time passes, how it seems like only yesterday they were young themselves, just married, just beginning the long journey of building a life together. The wife mentions that she has been dreaming of the gatherer's father lately, seeing him in her sleep, hearing him speak, though she cannot remember his words when she wakes. The gatherer nods, says that the dead are close during this time of year, that the veil between worlds thins when certain stars rise and certain festivals approach, that it is natural for ancestors to visit in dreams, to check on their descendants, to offer guidance, or simply to remind the living that death is not the end, only a transformation, a passage into another form of existence. They talk of the afterlife, of the judgment that awaits everyone when the heart is weighed against the feather of Mad, goddess of truth and justice. If the heart is light, unburdened by sin and cruelty, the deceased passes into paradise, into the field of reeds where life continues in idealized form, where there is no hunger or pain or fear, only peace and plenty forever. If the heart is heavy with wrongdoing, it is devoured by Ammit, the demon who waits beneath the scales, and the soul is obliterated, ceasing to exist in any form, the ultimate death from which there is no return. The gatherer feels confident about this coming judgment, not from arrogance, but from the simple knowledge of having lived as well as possible, having fulfilled duties, having treated others with kindness, having honored the gods with offerings and prayers, having raised children to be good people, having worked honestly and shared generously. This is what Mad requires, not perfection, but effort, not sinlessness, but sincere striving toward righteousness, toward living in harmony with the cosmic order that sustains all existence. The night deepens, the stars wheeling overhead in their slow dance. The gatherer and the wife finally rise and go inside, banking the fire, securing the door, preparing for sleep. They lie down side by side on their mat, the familiar weight and warmth of each other's presence a comfort beyond words. The gatherer's hand finds the wife's hand in the darkness, fingers intertwining in a gesture repeated thousands of times over the years. A simple affirmation of connection, of love that has deepened and mellowed like honey aging in a sealed jar, growing richer and more complex with time. Sleep comes gently, pulling them down into its soft embrace. The gatherer's last conscious thought is of the bees, resting in their hives, clustered together for warmth. Their collective breathing creating the gentle hum that continues even in darkness, even when no flowers bloom, even when the world seems to have stopped in the stillness of night. They are there, always there, living their intricate lives, following the ancient patterns coded into their very being, creating sweetness from flowers and air and sunlight, transforming the ordinary into the miraculous through patient labor and collective wisdom. The days continue their procession, each one similar yet unique, like beads on a string, individual yet part of a larger pattern. The gatherer wakes each morning before dawn, tends the hives, harvests honey when the time is right, processes the wax, fills the jars, makes the offerings, trades in the market, repairs the equipment, teaches the young, honors the ancestors, loves the family, watches the sun rise and set, listens to the Nile's eternal song, participates in festivals, mourns the dead, celebrates births and marriages, grows older, grows wiser, grows more deeply rooted in the life that has been given, the work that has been assigned, the place that has been prepared. The gatherer learns to read the weather in subtle signs, the color of the sunrise, the behavior of the birds, the feel of the air against skin. The gatherer learns to predict the Nile's flood by observing star positions and listening to travelers from the south who see the river rising before it reaches Lower Egypt. The gatherer learns which flowers produce the best honey, which seasons are most productive, which moon phases are auspicious for starting new hives or harvesting established ones. This knowledge is not written down, cannot be found in scrolls or papyrus documents. It lives in the body, in the hands that know without thinking how much smoke to use, in the ears that can distinguish healthy humming from distressed buzzing, in the eyes that can spot disease before it becomes obvious, in the intuition that comes from years of close attention to the same task, the same creatures, the same cycles repeating with variations that only an expert can detect and interpret. The gatherer becomes part of the landscape, as familiar and constant as the date palms that line the river, as the mud brick houses that shelter families, as the temple that dominates the horizon with its massive stone presence. Children grow up knowing the honey gatherer as they know their own relatives, as a fixed point in the turning world, someone who was there yesterday and will be there tomorrow, providing sweetness, sharing knowledge, embodying the continuity that makes community possible. When travelers pass through the village, they sometimes stop to watch the gatherer work with the bees. They marvel at the lack of fear, at the calm confidence with which the gatherer handles creatures that could sting, that could swarm, that could be dangerous in the wrong hands or with the wrong approach. The gatherer explains patiently, if asked, that there is no magic involved, only understanding, only respect, only the recognition that bees are not enemies, but partners, that they will respond to gentleness with trust, that violence begets violence, but peace begets cooperation. Some travelers buy honey to take with them on their journeys, knowing it will not spoil, that it can sustain them when other food is scarce, that it can be traded in distant markets for goods not available here. They carry the honey in carefully sealed jars, and with it they carry a piece of this place, this village, this moment in time when a gatherer stood before the hives and scooped golden sweetness into a vessel, sealing in not just honey, but the essence of Egyptian summer, the distilled spirit of flowers and sunshine, and patient human hands working in harmony with nature's abundance. The gatherer sometimes imagines these jars traveling far away to lands beyond the sea, to places where people speak different languages and worship different gods and eat different foods. But the honey needs no translation. Sweetness is universal. The pleasure of tasting honey is the same whether you are Egyptian or foreign, rich or poor, young or old. In this way, the The gatherer's work transcends boundaries, creates connections, participates in exchanges that build the web of human commerce and culture that spreads across the known world and beyond. But most of the honey stays local, is consumed by people the gatherer knows, is offered to gods whose temples the gatherer has visited, is spread on bread eaten by children the gatherer has watched grow from infants to adults. This local circulation has its own satisfaction, its own meaning. The gatherer is feeding the community, literally and symbolically, providing sweetness that makes life more bearable, more pleasant, more worth living. The gathered watches the seasons turn, sees the Nile flood and recede, sees the fields planted and harvested, sees children born and elders die, sees marriages celebrated and houses built, sees storms come and pass, sees years of abundance and years of scarcity, sees the great wheel of time turning slowly, carrying everything with it, changing everything while somehow keeping everything essentially the same. The village has been here for generations, will be here for generations more, built on land that the Nile has made fertile, populated by people who have learned to live in balance with their environment, to take what they need without destroying the source, to give back through offerings and prayers and careful stewardship of the resources that sustain them. This is sustainability in its original form, long before the word existed. The practical wisdom of people who understood that today's excess becomes tomorrow's famine if you do not plan, do not conserve, do not maintain the delicate balance between human needs and natural limits. The gatherer embodies this wisdom in the management of the hives. Never take all the honey. Always leave enough for the bees to survive through the times when flowers do not bloom. Never destroy a hive to get its honey. Always harvest carefully so the colony can rebuild and continue producing. Never ignore signs of weakness or disease. Always intervene when possible to save the bees, because they are not just honey-making machines, but living communities with their own right to exist and flourish. This ethic of care extends beyond the hives to all of life. The gatherer walks carefully to avoid crushing beetles in the path, moves slowly so as not to startle the birds, speaks gently to the neighbor's dog, treats even the humblest creature with respect. All life is sacred. All life is connected. What you do to the smallest being ripples outward and affects the whole web of existence in ways you cannot predict or control. The wife shares this ethic, teaches it to the children and grandchildren. She saves water from washing to give to the garden plants, waste nothing. She patches clothes until they cannot be patched anymore, then turns them into rags for cleaning, then burns the rags for fuel, using everything completely before discarding it. She thanks the gods for every meal, acknowledges the gift of food that could easily not be there, that is never guaranteed, that requires the cooperation of weather and river and human effort to manifest. Together, the gatherer and the wife have created a household that functions as the hive functions, each member contributing according to their ability, each member receiving according to their need, the surplus shared with the wider community, the whole system humming along with the smooth efficiency that comes from clear roles, shared values, and genuine care for each member's welfare. The grandchildren are being raised in this tradition, absorbing these values through daily example rather than explicit instruction. They learn by watching the gatherer work with the bees, by helping the wife prepare meals, by participating in family rituals and community celebrations, by being included in the adult world rather than segregated from it, by being treated as junior members of the household with real responsibilities and real contributions to make. The youngest grandchild, a boy of perhaps 4 years, follows the gatherer everywhere, his small shadow mimicking the larger one, his questions endless and sometimes unanswerable. Why do bees make honey? Where do they go at night? Do they sleep? Do they dream? Do they have families like we do? The gatherer answers as well as possible, admits ignorance when necessary, encourages curiosity, while gently reminding the boy that some mysteries are meant to remain mysterious, that not everything can or should be explained, that wonder is as important as knowledge, perhaps more important. This boy might become a beekeeper someday, or he might choose another path. The family does not force vocations on children, understands that each person has their own gifts, their own interests, their own destiny to fulfill. But whether he keeps bees or not, he will carry forward the lessons learned here. Patience, gentleness, respect for nature, understanding of cycles and rhythms, appreciation for sweetness, both literal and metaphorical. Knowledge that work done well is its own reward. Faith that life continues, that goodness matters, that love is the force that holds everything together when logic and reason fail. The gatherer grows frailer as the years accumulate, the body wearing out like a tool used faithfully for decades. The hands stiffen with age, the back aches after bending over the hives, the eyes blur sometimes, making it hard to see the small details that were once so clear. But the mind remains sharp, the knowledge intact, the passion for the work undimmed. The gatherer adjusts to physical limitations, works more slowly, rests more often, accepts help from the daughter, who has become the primary beekeeper, while the gatherer transitions to advisory role. The elder whose wisdom is consulted, but whose daily labor is no longer expected or required. This transition is not easy. The gatherer's identity has been so bound up with the work, with the daily round of tending hives and harvesting honey, that stepping back feels like a small death, a rehearsal for the final letting go that will come when the body can no longer sustain life. But the gatherer makes this transition as gracefully as possible, understanding that this too is part of the cycle, that making way for the next generation is as important as the work itself, that clinging too long to power and position serves no one, least of all oneself. The daughter is competent, careful, devoted to the bees and to the family tradition. She will carry it forward, will teach her own children, will add her own innovations and insights to the accumulated knowledge. The work will continue. The honey will flow. The offerings will be made. The gods will be pleased, and the community will have its sweetness. What more could the gatherer ask? What more could anyone ask than to know their work will outlast them, that they have passed something valuable forward, that their life has contributed to the great ongoing project of human civilization in its daily, humble, essential forms. The gatherer spends more time now at the household shrine, making offerings, saying prayers, preparing for death with the same careful attention given to every other important task. The gatherer has saved enough honey to pay for proper embalming, for the rituals that will ease the passage from this world to the next. The tomb has been prepared, a simple chamber cut into the desert rock, painted with protective symbols and prayers, stocked with the items needed for the afterlife journey. Food and drink, clothing and tools, amulets and scrolls, everything necessary to navigate the underworld and emerge into the paradise that awaits the righteous. The gatherer is not afraid of death, views it as the next adventure, the final journey that every human must make. The gatherer has lived well, has fulfilled duties, has loved and been loved, has contributed to the community, has honored the gods, has raised children who will honor their memory. The heart will be light when it is weighed in judgment. The gatherer is confident of this. Not perfectly light. No human heart is perfect, but light enough to pass the test, to be granted entrance into eternal life, into the field of reeds where the Nile flows with wine and honey, and the harvest never fails and loved ones wait to be reunited. And death has no more power over those who have conquered it through righteousness and faith. Meanwhile, life continues in all its daily beauty and challenge. The sun rises and sets, the Nile flows, the bees make honey, children play in the dust, women weave and grind and cook, men fish and farm and craft, and the gatherer sits in the shade, watching it all with eyes that have seen much, that understand more, that can recognize the eternal patterns beneath the temporary forms, the sacred geometry that underlies all existence. One evening, as the sky turns gold and purple with sunset, the gatherer sits near the hives one last time, listening to the bees settle in for the night. Their humming is soft now, gentle, like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. The gatherer closes their eyes and breathes deeply, inhaling the scent of honey and wax and flowers and river and desert, all blended together into the characteristic smell of Egypt, of home, of the only life the gatherer has ever known or wanted. A profound peace settles over the gatherer, a sense of completion, of rightness, of being exactly where one should be, doing exactly what one should be doing, being exactly who one is meant to be. There is no striving left, no ambition, no unfulfilled desire. There is only this moment, this breath, this heartbeat, this ancient connection to the bees and the land and the river and the gods who make it all possible. The gatherer's daughter approaches quietly, sits beside her aging parent in comfortable silence. After a while, the gatherer begins to speak, telling stories of the past, of how things were learned, of mistakes made and wisdom gained, of the first hive tended alone after the father died, of the swarm that came in the year of hardship and saved everything, of the day each child was born, and how the gatherer celebrated by offering the finest honey to the gods in gratitude for the gift of new life. The daughter listens, commits these stories to memory, knowing that someday she will tell them to her own children, that this is how wisdom passes down, how the dead remain alive in the memories and practices of the living, how time is defeated through the simple act of remembering, of honoring, of continuing the work that matters. As full darkness falls and the stars emerge in their countless thousands, the gatherer and the daughter walk slowly back to the village, back to the house where the wife is preparing the evening meal, where the grandchildren wait with their endless questions and boundless energy, where life in all its messy, beautiful complexity continues its eternal dance of creation and destruction, growth and decay, beginning and ending and beginning again. The gatherer sleeps deeply that night, dreams of flying over the delta, seeing it spread out below like a great green fan, life blooming in the midst of desert, the miracle of water and human effort transforming barren sand into abundant garden. The gatherer dreams of the bees growing large enough to ride, of flying on their backs to the source of the Nile, to the mountains where the river is born, to the place where the gods dwell and watch over the world they created. The gatherer dreams of honey filling the Nile, flowing to the sea, turning the Mediterranean sweet, feeding the whole world with golden nectar that never runs out, that satisfies every hunger, that heals every wound, that makes everything right again. And in the morning, the gatherer wakes refreshed, ready for another day of whatever life brings, ready to tend the bees or rest in the shade, ready to teach or to learn, ready to speak or to listen, ready for the work that remains or the rest that approaches, ready for the continuation of this sweet, ordinary, sacred life that has been such a gift, such an unexpected blessing, such a rich and full participation in the great mystery of existence itself. And now the clay hives and the golden honey and the ancient riverside village begin to dim behind your thoughts. We've drifted through 100 quiet truths of the honey gatherer's world. The pre-dawn walks to check the hives, while the village still slept in darkness. The careful preparation of smoke from dried grass and reeds. The patient waiting while the bees grew calm and heavy with their own honey. We felt the texture of wax built in perfect hexagons by creatures working with knowledge older than humanity. We've tasted bread dipped in honey fresh from the comb. We've heard the eternal whisper of the Nile flowing through the valley, bringing life to the desert. We've watched children learning ancient skills from parents who learned from their parents. Knowledge passing down through generations, like water through channels carved in stone. We've seen the gatherer growing old with grace, stepping back to let the daughter take over the work, preparing for death with the same careful attention given to every task in life. We felt the rhythm of the seasons marked by floods and harvests, by festivals and offerings, by the rising and setting of stars that guide both the living and the dead. We've understood the sacred partnership between human and bee, the covenant made in the distant past that binds them still, that creates sweetness from flower and sun and patient hands. We've glimpsed the beauty of ordinary life lived with attention and care, work done well for its own sake, love expressed through 1,000 small gestures that add up to a lifetime of devotion. You are a part of this history, not just a listener, but a participant in humanity's long and luminous unfolding. The warmth in your home, the food on your table, the sweetness you taste, the work you do with care and patience, all of these trace their lineage to these ancient times when people first learned to live in harmony with the natural world, to cultivate relationships with other creatures, to create meaning through daily practice. The honey-gatherer's patience lives in you when you slow down and attend to small details. Their respect for nature lives in you when you treat other beings with kindness. Their devotion to family lives in you when you care for those you love. Their faith in continuity lives in you when you pass knowledge forward to the next generation. You carry these ancient patterns within you, coded into your very being, inheritance from ancestors who lived thousands of years ago along the banks of the Nile. Tonight, as you rest, the ancient Egyptian village turns on. The gatherer is walking to the hives in the pre-dawn darkness. The bees are beginning to stir, preparing for another day of flight and flower gathering. The Nile is flowing with its eternal patience, carrying fertile silt from far to the south. The sun is rising over the eastern desert, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Children are waking to help their parents with the day's work. Wife is grinding grain for bread while humming an ancient lullaby. Smoke is rising from morning fires all through the village. The temple priests are making the first offerings of the day. Fishermen are casting their nets into the river's slow current, and the honey is flowing, drop by golden drop, from comb to jar to offering bowl to eager mouth, sweetening life for everyone it touches. The routines are unfolding. Light is fading from our view, but blazing in that ancient world. Silent lives continue their work, and you are floating within it. A small warmth in the vast past, resting in the tapestry of quiet human stories that stretch from the beginning of time to this very moment when your eyes close and your breathing slows and sleep gathers you into its gentle embrace. I hope you sleep well and dream softly. Good night.